Evening panel. Chair, I do have a specific question, but I just want to make one comment. And I hazard a guess that I might be... My name's James O'Keefe. I run a PR firm too. So I'm a self-confessed PR. But I hazard a guess that I might be talking for many of the PRs in this room and many of the students that are considering a career in PR. I don't want them to be put off by some of the things we've heard because, frankly, when I hear Nick use language like the PR industry is abusing the current weakness of the press, I find that deeply insulting because it suggests that my profession is about misleading and lying. And well, I think it does. I think that's certainly how I interpret it. And I think many of my colleagues in the industry might. And in 10 years or more that I've been doing this, certainly I've not knowingly, and that's not a PR word because none of us know for sure, knowingly misled or lied to anyone. But my question is that in your experience, gentlemen, it's obviously directed at Nick and Roy, if this has been such a threat and it's been an increasing threat to you, have you ever discovered a time where a PR has misled or lied to you? Because I'd be interested to hear that. And I guess the only final point to make, Trevor, is about PR. From what I could see, the only person PRing at this event tonight is you, Nick, with your books piled up at the front. Thank you.
You're quite right.
Can I just come back at something Roy said? There's this somehow, I think, naive belief that the government were out there PRing their attitude and their strategy on weapons of mass destruction. Do we honestly believe there wasn't opposition to that? Because the Daily Mirror, for instance, were PRing the opposite. And certainly The Guardian and I think The Observer were PRing the opposite. I mean, there are PRs on both sides of the fence. They're not all on one side of the fence. And very often it's a very equal and even battle, I think.
Okay. Nick, do you want to answer James's question?
Yes, you're misinterpreting what I'm saying. The PR people do tell lies. I've had lies told to me. There are good examples in the book of PR people lying. But the central core of it comes back to this business of choosing which truth you tell. So one of the things I did in the book was to analyse the story of the NatWest 3. Do you remember? And this starts with 3 bankers from NatWest who were arrested in the aftermath of the collapse of Enron. And they are charged with corruption. And for about 9 months... their story is covered with great hostility. These are greedy, self-indulgent womanizers who are bad people. And then suddenly, the coverage changes, and they become instead victims of an unjust law which wants to extradite them to the United States through an unjust criminal justice process. And the same newspapers who were attacking them are suddenly seeing them as victims. And the reason that happened was PR. They hired a very good PR company called Belliard Communications, who got in there and said, instead of running this narrative, which is true, that they are alleged lawbreakers, let's substitute a new narrative, which is true, that they are the victims of an unfair law. And because PR, as a result of our vulnerability, has the ability to change the way, to exploit was the word I used rather than abuse, to exploit us, they imposed that new narrative on us because we're sitting there passively processing what other people are feeding us. That's the heart of it. So there are lies out there, and I deeply object to the PR people who've lied to me and other journalists. But the heart of it isn't dishonesty. It is what you are doing, what you're doing that is wrong is precisely what Tim Bell has said that you do. That is to say, he acts with bias. He acts with the interests of the people who are paying him. The NatWest 3 is a beautiful example of it.
I think what Nick is now saying is that the PR industry is obviously seriously flawed. He's now saying the journalist industry is so naive that it believes anything anybody tells them and just runs it in the paper.
That's more or less right. That is exactly what I'm saying. We are very, very weak.
In that case, the newspaper integrity is zero.
This debate really is about, and I said it it's about the relative weakness that is now clear in journalism and the relative strength of PR.
Exactly.
It is not, of course I have spoken to PRs in a perfectly reasonable fashion, and that it is not about individual PRs. It's not necessarily even about individual stories. It is about assessing where we are going in journalism. Our journalism is weakened for all sorts of reasons, mainly to do with resources, and your PR has grown stronger in the vacuum. That's the point.
Exactly.
Okay, I'd like to take a question from up north, but ideally one that perhaps comes slightly more from the motion's point of view rather than against the motion. Anybody? The gentleman in the middle towards the back with the sideburns.
My name is Biresh Banerjee. I'm a student of media management at this university. I've been a journalist, a broadcast journalist, as well as a print journalist. It's a very interesting topic, and we seem to suggest somewhere that we expect PR persons to be journalists themselves. and speak the truth. Roy Greenslade, you mentioned 2 questions that we as audience and readers need to ask: where the story is coming from and who's paying for it. Why aren't journalists asking that question? And to say that you have cost cuts, which is a worldwide phenomenon in newspapers or wherever else, because that is happening, we cannot ask those questions. Is that a reasonable excuse?
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, what I think is we should aim for transparency, and I think that the only way for fair reporting is to explain who you've spoken to, who you haven't spoken to, and in so doing, make it clear therefore you know who's being paid for and so on. I think that's the only way to cure, well, one of the ways to cure the problem. Nick calls in his book in pointing out that many stories come from agencies. The agencies themselves have only spoken to one PR. We don't even credit at the moment the agencies. So along in the reporting trail, we have to go back to basics and ask ourselves whether we are doing enough to reveal the truth in every story.